It's late evening. A damp chill hangs in the air, foreshadowing a November night. Min-ho sits in the back seat of his dark car, parked in the shade of an old oak tree. He doesn't like driving at times like this. From behind, he has a better view, more time to react. The engine is off, and the cabin is filled with that special, dense silence that only expensive cars have. Through the tinted windows, the street seems hazy. He stares at the traffic light at the intersection. It works like a metronome: green, yellow, red. The cycle has been repeating without a hitch for 40 minutes now. Min-ho waits for a call. The phone lies on the seat next to him, black, silent, irritatingly still. He glances at it from time to time, but doesn't touch it. Impatience is a sign of weakness. And he's not weak, he's simply waiting. Every minute is a test of his strength. He mentally runs through possible scenarios. Why isn't he calling? Is there a delay? Is there a problem? Or is this part of the game? A test of his endurance. His face is an impenetrable mask, but his eyes flicker with cold fury at this uncertainty. He glances at the street. It's deserted. Across the street is a row of 5-story apartment buildings. The windows dark. Only in one, on the 3rd floor, does the blue glow of a television flicker. On the corner is a 24-hour convenience store called Near Home. Behind the grimy glass, a long row of shelves and a cash register are visible, behind which sits an elderly, bespectacled clerk. He's reading a newspaper, completely indifferent to the world beyond. Min-ho notices every detail: trash caught in the wind and swirling around a drainpipe, a cat's shadow sliding along the garage wall. He listens. The silence is broken only by the distant, constant hum of the big city, like the sound of the sea. Here, in this neighborhood, it's quiet. Too quiet. Such silence must be endured, like pain. He looks at the traffic light again. Red. Everything freezes. And into this very silence, into this pause, a sharp, metallic sound cuts in. Ding ding! The door of the 24-hour store opens. The ringing of the bell above the door seems incredibly loud. A little girl emerges from the brightly lit doorway onto the street. Min-ho focuses her gaze like a camera lens. She's about 7, no more. She's wrapped in an enormous pink puffer jacket that fits her like a sack, reaching almost to her knees. On her feet are purple boots with peeling light-up inserts. In her hand is a bulging plastic bag. It's so full that the thin handles dig into her palms. She carries it, leaning slightly to the side, struggling with the weight. She stops beneath the sign and looks around. Her movements are quick, bird-like. Her large, dark eyes dart restlessly through the dark entryways, scanning the sidewalks, peering into the black maw of an alley. She's clearly searching for danger, but her gaze stubbornly glides low, at ground level. She looks at her feet, to the sides, but never up. She completely misses the traffic light hanging directly above her head, which at that very second switches to red with a soft click. Stupid, Min-ho thinks. And it's not a thought, but an almost physical sensation. A metallic taste in his mouth, not toward her, toward those who let her go. What parents? Where's her head? Basic rules. Night. The child alone. He imagines for a moment a car speeding around the corner. The image appears before his eyes, clear and unpleasant. He pushes it away. This isn't his problem. This is chaos invading his space, and he hates chaos. The girl seems to calm down. There are no enemies in sight. She grabs the bag, clasps it with both hands, clutches it to her chest like a treasure, and with quick, shuffling steps off the sidewalk and into the street. She doesn't walk. She runs. Her boots splash loudly on the wet asphalt. She looks only ahead, at the familiar door of her building across the street. She hurries home, to warmth, to light, to her mother, and above her, bright, relentless, and completely ignored, the red traffic light burns. It illuminates her from above, making her pink jacket even brighter, almost neon, against the gray asphalt. Min-ho's irritation boils deep in his chest and rises like a lump in his throat. This isn't just a thought anymore. It's a challenge to order, to rules, to logic, her vulnerability, her blindness, a magnet for disaster. And he sits here, watching this disaster unfold before his eyes. His fingers grip the edge of the leather seat. He can't just watch anymore. This violation must be corrected. Now, before it's too late. His hand reaches for the door handle. The movement is precise, sharp. The door opens silently, but the cold night air rushes in with a hiss, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The smell of damp asphalt, rotting leaves, and distant city smoke assaults his nose. Min-ho steps out. A cool breeze immediately embraces his tall figure in his long, dark coat. He doesn't slam the door. He pushes it with his shoulder, and it closes with a soft click. 3 quick, firm steps, and he's at the edge of the sidewalk. The girl is already halfway down the road. Her pink back is a bright, absurd target. "Hey!" he blurts out. The voice sounds not like a shout, but like a command honed over years. Sharp, commanding, drowning out all other sounds. It cuts through the silence like a blade. The girl's whole body shudders, as if struck by an electric shock. She turns around abruptly, and the bag in her hands crunches violently. Her eyes, already large, grow enormous with surprise and fear. She sees him, a a tall, unfamiliar, dark man, looking at her without a hint of a smile. He stands under a street lamp, and his shadow falls across the road in a long black stripe, resting right at her feet. Minho steps off the curb onto the asphalt. His soles slap softly on the wet surface. He closes the distance. "You're crossing on a red light," he says. Every word is clear, cold, and emotionless, like reading a manual. "That's prohibited. Rules aren't just for show. Where are your parents?" The girl is silent. She freezes, turning into a statue of fear. Her lips are slightly parted, but there is no sound. "I'm asking, where are your adults?" he repeats, taking another step forward. Now there are only a few meters between them. "Why are you alone? At this time? On an empty street?" The pressure in his voice, his entire posture, upright, menacing, makes her instinctively retreat. She takes a step back, her heel catching on the white line of the crosswalk. This movement, this silent, frightened disobedience, drives his irritation to the limit. He opens his mouth to speak out everything he thinks about irresponsible parents. Her voice, thin and clear, cuts through his irritation for a second. Minho sees her fingers dig into the plastic bag. Her name is Ayla. The name flashes through his mind by chance and immediately registers as fact. "Mom's home," she repeats, a little more confidently, seeing that he hasn't moved. "She asked me to go get some bread. It was the last one." She nods toward the bag, as if that explains everything. And then adds, almost in a whisper, looking him straight in the eye with childish directness, "We're cooking dinner." She says it as if cooking dinner is a sacred ritual, the most important act in the universe, and maybe for her right now, it is. She points with her hand, fingers spread, still clutching the handle of the bag, at the gray 5-story building directly across the street. Right there, Minho automatically follows her gesture. The third entrance. On the ground floor, the light is on in the kitchen, yellow, warm, ordinary. A picture of peaceful life that contrasts so sharply with the cold metal of his evening. For a second, a strange feeling overcomes him, between envy and bewilderment. How can one be so carefree? How can one let a child go out into the night to buy bread? That's exactly what he's about to say. His lips are already forming for another harsh sentence. He wants to ask what kind of mother she is. He wants to order her never to do that again. He wants to restore the violated order. The world is exploding. It's not the sound at first. It's the change in pressure. A sharp, painful change in his ears, like when a plane takes off, only 1,000 times stronger. The air compresses into a dense, invisible wall and hits him from behind. Then comes the sound, but it's not a roar as described in books. It's an all-consuming, absolute rumor that erases all other sounds. He doesn't hear it. He feels it in his bones, his teeth, the fluid inside his skull. It's the sound of his car turning into a fireball, the sound of tearing metal, shattering glass, crumpling steel. It fills the entire universe. And then, in that split second, heat. A wave of searing, dry heat hits his back, the back of his head, his shoulders. He feels the fabric of his coat instantly become hot against his back. A pungent, bittersweet smell of burning plastic, gasoline, and something else, something chemical, something terrible, assaults his nose. He doesn't see the flash. He only sees a blinding white light flooding everything around him, casting a sharp, distorted shadow of Ayla on the pavement before him. Her face, in that moment, becomes a mask of pure mute terror, illuminated by a hellish light from behind. Minho's muscles fire before his brain can process the information. Years of training, gunshots, danger, all of it compressed into one instant, unconscious decision. He doesn't cover Ayla. He attacks her. His body, already propelled by the shockwave, lunges forward. His left hand slams hard into the bag in her hands, knocking it loose. The bag flies to the side, cans and packaging scattering across the asphalt with a dull thud. His right arm doesn't hug her, but almost grabs her jacket and yanks her sharply toward himself, simultaneously turning. He turns his back to the epicenter of the fire, pressing her small, pliant body to his chest with his stomach, covering her head with his arm. He doesn't fall. He retreats. With quick, adrenaline-fueled steps, he backs toward the dark arched doorway of the nearest entrance, dragging her along with him. They find themselves in the cold, concrete shadow, just 3 meters from the edge of the blast, as a rain of glass falls onto the asphalt, where they had just been standing. These aren't shrapnel. These are pulverized fragments. Thousands. Millions of them, sharp and glittering in the fire. They fall with a high, shrill ringing sound, like the sound of a crystal chandelier shattering. They cover the ground in a ringing, dangerous carpet. Something larger, a piece of a chrome door handle, or a broken headlight, slams into the wall next to their heads, with a sound like a gunshot into concrete. Minho presses his back against the cold wall of the entrance hall, still holding Ayla in an iron grip. He feels her entire body tremble with small, rapid shivers, like a trapped animal. She's not crying. She's not screaming. She's simply shaking, her face buried in his coat. The heat from the fireball reaches here, into their shelter. It now smells of disaster, of burning, soot, and death. Only now, in relative safety, does Minho's brain begin to process the situation. The ringing in her ears gradually fades, replaced by the distant muffled crackle of flames and the wail of a siren somewhere 3 streets away. He looks over the girl's head at what used to be his car. Now it's a bonfire, tall, furious, devouring. It illuminates the entire street, turning night into day. Shadows dance in its orange light, and these shadows seem alive and angry. He looks at the fire, then his gaze drops to the dark hair under his chin, to the pink fabric of the jacket he's still clutching in his fist. If it weren't for her, if it weren't for that girl who crossed on a red light, he would be sitting in the car. He would be waiting for the call. He would be burned alive. The thought doesn't evoke fear. It evokes a chilling, crystalline rage. Someone did it. Someone dared. But that's later. Now, in his arms, trembling, is the child who just saved his life without knowing it. He loosens his grip. His fingers are numb. He gently pushes Ayla away from him, holding her shoulders. She lifts her face to him. It's wet with silent tears, dirty with soot and sweat. Her eyes search for answers he doesn't have. Your house! 3rd entrance? His voice sounds hoarse, unfamiliar to his own ears. She nods, unable to utter a word. Let's go, he says, and it's no longer an order. It's a necessity. Minho looks at the torn plastic bag lying at their feet. Pasta, a jar of sauce, crumpled bread, all scattered across the dirty asphalt. He bends down, still holding Ayla's hand, and gathers the food back into the torn plastic bag. The action is automatic, almost unconscious. He needs to carry something. He can't come empty-handed. Here, he says, placing the wet, sticky bag in her free hand. His fingers brush against her icy ones. He leads her across the street. His steps are quick, hers mincing. She can barely keep up. He doesn't look back at the fire, but he feels its heat on his back and sees the orange glow playing on the walls of the buildings in front of them. The world has narrowed to these paving stones, to the cold child's hand in his, and to the door of the 3rd entrance. He stops in front of a dark wooden door with peeling paint. The light from the street lamp barely reaches it. Ayla pulls her hand away and reaches for the doorbell, but Minho has already raised his fist and knocked. 3 clear, loud knocks, not fussy, specific. Quick footsteps are heard from behind the door. Approaching, the bolt clicks inside. The door opens. A tall woman stands in the doorway. Sharon. She's wearing a loose house jacket and warm socks. She holds a tea towel in one hand. She smells of something delicious and homemade. Tomatoes, herbs, warm bread. Her gaze finds her daughter first. The mother's face instantly softens, ready to break into a smile. But then her gaze slides up to Minho. Her face changes. Instantly, the softness vanishes, replaced by a tense, piercing focus. Her eyes, wide open, scan him quickly, his long, dark coat stained and dusty, his stern, pale face, his hard gaze. Then she sees Ayla's pale, soot-stained face, her huge eyes, her crumpled, wet bag. The tension on Sharon's face gives way to worry. Real, deep worry. She's not afraid of him, the way one might be afraid of something clearly threatening. She's afraid of the situation. A strange man, night, a frightened child. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. She instinctively steps forward, as if to stand between Minho and Ayla, but stops. Her fingers tighten around the towel. Ayla! Her voice sounds sharp, higher than usual. What happened? Who is it? Minho sees that look. He's seen it hundreds of times. The look of a man preparing for the worst. He takes a half step back, moving away slightly. He needs to reduce the threat. He needs to speak. Sorry to disturb you at this hour, he begins. His voice is deliberately quiet, even, devoid of any sharp edges. He stands very straight, his hands at his sides, demonstrating a non-threatening demeanor. My name is Min. Your daughter is physically fine. She is unharmed. He pauses, briefly but meaningfully, letting the words sink in. He sees the muscles in her cheekbones twitch slightly, but the tension doesn't subside. But there was just an incident outside, he continues, choosing his words carefully. He gestures over his shoulder without turning around. Near the store, an explosion, probably a gas accident in a car. He lies, easily and smoothly. Gas is simple, clear, and doesn't raise unnecessary questions about enemies and contracts. Your daughter was nearby. She was naturally scared. I just happened to be the closest. I helped her get to safety. He looks back at Ayla, who's pressed against the doorframe, looking at her mother with pleading eyes. He gives Sharon time. He sees her brain processing the information. The explosion, her daughter nearby, the stranger helping. He sees her gaze slide behind him, and she notices something she hadn't seen before in her anxiety for her child. The reflection of the unstable, dancing orange light in the windows of the houses across the street. He hears a distant, but still audible, crackling and humming. Her face turns pale. The towel falls from her weakened fingers and lands on the hallway floor. Oh my God, she whispers. She grabs the doorframe to steady herself. Her eyes are glued to her daughter's face again, studying every detail, searching for bruises, abrasions, blood. Ayla, honey, are you sure you're okay? Are you hurt? I'm okay, Mom, Ayla says quietly, finally finding her voice. Uncle, he hid me. This simple childish phrase falls into the silence between adults with the weight of a kettlebell. Sharon looks at Min-ho in a new way. The panic doesn't subside, but it takes on a new hue, a sharp, all-consuming shame and gratitude. She saw him as a threat, and he saved her child. Oh my God, she repeats. Louder now, her voice shaking. She runs a hand over her face. I'm sorry for my tone. I was just scared. Thank you. Thank you so much. She bends down and picks up the towel, doing it just to keep her hands busy, to hide the trembling. If it weren't for you. She doesn't finish the sentence, swallowing again. Her gaze falls on the pitiful, soggy bag in Ayla's hands. The groceries. Everything's gone. Come inside, baby. You're shaking all over. Ayla steps over the threshold hesitantly, but stops, looking back at Min-ho. Sharon looks at him too. He stands on the cold, dark threshold, a distant and lonely figure against the raging glow behind him. He's done his job, brought the child, and now it seems he's ready to simply turn around and walk into the night. Into the night where sirens still wail and something burns. Thoughts race through her head. He saved Ayla. He stood between her and the fire. He brought her home. And him? He's covered in dust. He's just been through this. Will he just leave? The impulse is born faster than the mind can process it. It is driven by guilt, gratitude, and simple human compassion. Please excuse us. I'm in a complete panic, of course, she says quickly, the words flying out like a machine gun. But you can't just leave. Look at yourself. And I'm just putting dinner on the table. Pasta. She nods with a bitter smile at the bag of broken food, although now it seems without sauce. But please, come in. At least warm up, at least for a minute. I can't let you go like this. She says this not as a formal politeness, but with genuine, sincere urgency. She opens the door a little wider. A wave of warmth and that delicious smell of home-cooked food billows out from the apartment behind her. This smell is the complete opposite of the smell of burning and fear that Min-ho brought with him. He looks at her, then he casts a quick, assessing glance over his shoulder at the street. The sirens are getting closer. Soon there will be firefighters, police, questions, faces. Attention. He can't stay here. He needs to disappear, blend into the night, take action. Ayla's wide, still frightened eyes, looking at him from the hallway. And he sees her mother's face, pale, tired, but full of a stubborn desire to do at least something right in this suddenly mad world. He stands at the threshold, on the border between the cold chaos of the street and the warm, food-scented order of this small apartment. His mind screams at him to leave, now, but he nods slowly, almost weightlessly. Min-ho nods. It's a small, almost imperceptible movement of the head, and it's difficult for him to do. Every cell in his body, every instinct screams at him to run, to hide, to analyze the threat, to act. He stands on the threshold beyond which lies his war, but he steps over it. The hallway is cramped and cozy. It smells of floor wax and that same tomato sauce. Children's jackets hang on a coat rack, and colorful boots lie on the floor. Ayla has already taken off her pink puffer jacket, and now she seems even smaller in her Simple House t-shirt. Come in, Sharon says, gesturing briskly toward the small kitchen. Sorry about the mess. There's no clutter. The tiny kitchen is spotless. A bowl of fresh salad sits on the table, a steaming pot of pasta, and, yes, a second, smaller one, with simple tomato sauce from a jar. A spare, apparently. Sharon quickly takes out a third plate and cutlery. Please sit down. Ayla, wash your hands. And, please, she turns to Min-ho. Also, if it's not too much trouble, through that door. He follows the directions silently. The bathroom is tiny, plastered with children's drawings and bright stickers. He washes his hands, washing away the soot and dust, and looks at his face in the mirror. It is pale, his eyes dark, and there is tension at the corners of his lips. He splashes cold water on his face. A silence falls at the table, broken only by the soft clink of cutlery. Sharon puts pasta on his plate and pours sauce over it. Ayla, having washed her hands, sits down and stares at him. By the way, my name is Sharon, the hostess says, finally sitting down. And this is Ayla. Once again, thank you so much. My name is Min, he answers simply. The name sounds bare, without a surname, without a patronymic, just a syllable. Min, Sharon repeats, as if testing the sound. Have you been in our area long? Just passing through, he answers with one word, picking up his fork. He eats automatically, not noticing the taste. Food is fuel. But here it's warm, and it's been cooked. That changes things. Ayla picks at the pasta on her plate, and then suddenly says, turning to him, Do you have a car? Min-ho freezes for a second, his fork frozen in midair. Sharon casts a frightened glance at her daughter. Ayla! There was, Min answers calmly. The one that exploded, probably from the gas. He says it so simply that the tension eases a little. Oh, this is terrible, Sharon sighs. You must be in for a nightmare with your documents and insurance now. Yes, he agrees, although he's already mentally dismissed the machine as a lost tool. Trouble. The conversation moves in fits and starts, with pauses that Min-ho is slow to fill. Sharon asks if he works nearby. He replies, I run a business. So vague, it sounds like a deliberate excuse. She seems to understand this and doesn't press. Ayla, having swallowed several mouthfuls of pasta, perks up. The shock begins to subside, replaced by excitement from the unexpected adventure and the presence of the mysterious stranger. I took a math test today, she says out of place. I got an A, just one mistake. Well done, Min says. It's the first response he's made that doesn't sound like a direct answer to a question. He looks at her and sees her shoulders straighten at the praise. We have a new hamster at school, she continues, getting excited. His name is Bublik. He sleeps all the time. Sharon glances from her daughter to the guest with a slight apologetic smile, but Min doesn't look irritated. He listens. He finds it strange. These childhood stories, this flow of ordinary, peaceful life. In his world, conversations revolve around debts, boundaries, deliveries, power. Here, they talk about hamsters and tests. This scene, the warm light over the table, the clink of plates, her mother's gaze, seems surreal to him. He feels like an observer, wandering into someone else's, too vivid and simple, dream. This calm envelops him like a dangerous quagmire. Here, one can forget, but one cannot forget. Would you like more sauce? Sharon asks, interrupting his thoughts. No, thank you. Everything was delicious, he replies with a polite, rehearsed phrase. It's true, but he barely tasted it. He notices that Ayla's hands are no longer shaking. She's already laughing, telling him something about her friend Vanya, who fell into a puddle. Sharon straightens her hair. And in this simple gesture, there's so much normality. This is probably what makes ordinary people worth living. He's never experienced anything like this. He finishes the last forkful of pasta and carefully places the utensils on his plate. The action is precise, final. Politeness is all well and good, but time is up. Dinner was wonderful, he says, his voice slightly formal, as if thanking a business partner. You're very kind. He pushes back his chair and stands. His tall figure immediately fills the small kitchen, reminding both him and them that he is a foreign body here. Sharon jumps up too. Already? Are you sure? Maybe coffee? Tea? No, thank you. I really have to go. His tone leaves no room for argument. He turns to Ayla, who looks at him with sudden disappointment. Be careful on the roads, and listen to your mother. Yes, sir, she mutters. He heads for the exit. Sharon follows him, rubbing her hands on a towel in confusion. He pauses in the hallway. From here, the street is visible again through the doorway window. The glow has died down a bit, but the flashing blue lights of police cars are already coloring the walls of the houses opposite. Sorry again for bothering you, he says, now looking Sharon straight in the eye. And thank you for dinner. And for your trust. He says the last word with a slight effort. It is more important to him than it might seem. Thanks to us, she replies warmly. If anything, if there are problems with the car's paperwork or, I don't know, we live here. She's not offering help. She's offering a foothold in the area. He understands that. I'll keep that in mind. He opens the door. Cold air, now tinged with the smell of burning and chemicals, rushes into the warm hallway. He doesn't look back. He steps out onto the landing, and the door clicks shut behind him, cutting off that island of warmth and light. The stairs are dark and empty. He stands for a second, listening. Voices and footsteps can be heard from below, probably the residents gathered at the entrance, discussing the incident. He won't go there. His hand fumbles for the second phone, the clean one in his coat pocket. His face, which had just been almost human, freezes into an impenetrable mask once more. The last glimmer of the kitchen light fades from his eyes. Ming disappears. Only Min-ho remains. He quickly and silently descends the basement stairs, which, as he's already noticed, has an exit into the neighboring courtyard. He doesn't have a car, but he has business. Very urgent business. Someone made a grave mistake today, thinking they could destroy him. Now that someone will learn the price of that mistake. But before disappearing into the darkness of the service exit, he pauses for a second. From behind the door of Sharon and Isla's apartment, he hears his mother's muffled, soothing voice and the quiet sound of a child's laughter. He listens to the sound, just for a second. Then he turns and leaves. The taxi door closes with a dull click, cutting off the world outside. The smell of cheap air freshener and old upholstery fills the air. Min-ho leans back in his seat and stares out the fogged glass. His reflection, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, stares back at him from the darkness. He is no longer the Min from the warm kitchen. Every soft spot in his soul, every trace of the comfort he just left, he methodically freezes, stores in a dark, inaccessible safe. Now he needs to work. Central Station, he tells the driver, in a voice that brooks no questions. As the car starts moving, he takes a thin, simple phone out of his inside pocket, not the one in his burned-out car. A different one, a clean one. He dials the number with memory, without looking. Speak, he hears an even, alert voice on the phone. It's me. The machine has been destroyed. I'm out. Point Alpha is compromised. His words are short like blows. No emotion. We're switching to plan quiet. All contacts through new channels. Immediately. Got it. What's the reason? Internal. That's the most terrible thing you can say in his world. Betrayal of his own. We need a full audit of the last 72 hours. Everyone who knew about my location. Everyone who had access to the car. Financial flows for the last week. We're looking for anomalies. Overt and covert. It will be done. Any suspicions? Minho looks out the window at the passing lanterns. His face in the reflection doesn't waver. There are too many who would like to take my place. Narrow it down to those who had the desire, the opportunity, and access to a new type of explosive. These are professionals, not amateurs. Look among us. There's a short, heavy pause on the line. Then a voice answers, icy fury in it. I'll find it. What next? I'm disappearing, for now. You are my eyes and ears. Report every 6 hours, and prepare the team. We might need cleaning, large scale. Understood. And one more thing, adds Minho, his voice losing some of its steely monotony and becoming slightly quieter. There's one more thing. A family, a woman and a girl in the area of the incident. They're not involved. They're just bystanders. We need to ensure quiet surveillance. From a distance, if there's even the slightest interest from outsiders, I need to be the first to know. Protection? Observation, he corrects sharply. Only observation. No contact. They mustn't know. He hangs up. The phone disappears into his pocket. He looks out at the city beyond the glass. Someone has crossed the line. Someone has decided they can eliminate him. Not just eliminate a competitor, but wipe out a symbol, an authority. This isn't business anymore. This is a war of annihilation. And in such a war, there are no half measures. The source of the threat must be found and eliminated, quickly, effectively, and in such a way that it becomes a lesson to everyone else. He closes his eyes. For a second, his mind's eye sees not a fireball, but the warm light of the kitchen, a plate of plain pasta, and the girl's wide eyes. He pushes the image away. Right now, it's weakness. And weakness right now could be fatal. 2 days later, Sharon leaves the apartment to take out the trash. By the door, right on the clean rug, sits a basket. Not a bag, not a sack. A beautiful wicker basket made of light-colored vine. She bends down carefully. Inside, on soft corrugated paper, lies fruit. Not apples and bananas from the nearest supermarket. Atlas tangerines with their leaves still attached. Velvety passion fruits. A few pomegranates. Dark, almost black grapes on a vine. And between them, like precious stones, are chocolates in gold wrappers. Expensive ones, the kind you buy in specialty shops. Sharon looks around the empty stairwell. No one is there. She lifts the basket. It's heavy and smells of sweet citrus freshness. Among the fruit lies a small, thick card. Plain white card unadorned. On it, in even, almost calligraphic handwriting, is written, "With hope for brighter days. Min." She reads these words several times. With hope for brighter days. It's not, thank you. Not sorry to bother you. It's something more. It's a wish. Personal and somehow caring. She brings the basket inside and sets it on the table. Ayla runs up, her eyes lighting up. Wow! Who's this from? From that guy, Sharon says quietly. From Min. Wow! Ayla reaches for the chocolate bar, but Sharon catches her hand. Later. Let's have breakfast first. She stands and looks at the basket. It's too generous. Too personal. A feeling of unease mingles with gratitude. Who is this Min? The businessman whose car exploded? Why such expensive gifts? What does it all mean? But when she sees Ayla admiringly examining the passion fruit, pointing at it, and asking what it is, her anxiety subsides a little. Maybe he's just a grateful man. A weirdo. Thanks. 3 more days pass. On Saturday morning, the intercom rings. It's the courier, a package addressed to Sharon. This time it's a large, flat cardboard box, neatly tied with paper twine. Sharon, her heart sinking, brings it inside. Ayla is already hovering around. Open up, Mom! Open up! Inside, wrapped in thin tissue paper, are paints. Not your typical school gouache paints, but professional watercolor paints in tubes and small pans, housed in a wooden box with a hinged lid. The watercolor paper is thick and textured. Several squirrel brushes of varying thicknesses, perfectly smooth, are also included, and a thick, impressive sketchbook with a sturdy cover. Ayla freezes, her mouth hanging open in amazement. She loves to draw. Her old paint set is almost dry, and the sketchbook is long gone. She reaches out, but doesn't dare touch it, as if it were a sacred relic. There's another card, same handwriting. For the little artist, Min. Sharon sat down. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. This was attention. He remembered. Over 2 meetings, over 1 dinner, he'd grasped her daughter's inner workings. He'd noticed how Isla, having recovered from her shock, was carefully doodling something on a napkin in the kitchen. She feels boundaries being violated. This stranger, even though he saved her child, now enters their lives with such precise, all too precise blows. It's flattering, it's infinitely touching, but it's also frightening. The scale of the gifts suggests money. The attention to detail suggests a serious, analytical mind, and his own life, judging by that incident, clearly extends beyond the peaceful office. She looks at her daughter, who, holding her breath, opens the box of paints and touches the brushes. Mom, can I try it? Right now, there's so much happiness, so much delight in her eyes that Sharon catches her breath. How can she say no? How can she take away this light, this gift that is clearly given from the heart? There is no hint into the cards, no pressure, only quiet, reserved kindness. Of course, baby, she says, her voice a little hoarse. Just be careful. These are very good paints. I know, Ayla exclaims, already pouring water into the jar. Sharon walks to the window, clutching a plain white card. For the little artist. She looks out onto the street, where nothing remains of the explosion except a dark stain on the asphalt that the utility workers never cleaned. Who are you, Min? She thinks. And this time the question rings in her head, not with alarm, but with a growing, incomprehensible curiosity. Embarrassment was a heavy, uncomfortable feeling. It settled in Sharon's chest and refused to leave. The fruit basket sat on the kitchen table, a reminder of a generosity that bordered on the surreal. The paints sat on the shelf in Ayla's room like sacred relics. Sharon paces the apartment, feeling like an unwelcome debtor. Who is this man? For real. She replays that evening in her mind. His reserve, almost coldness, his expensive, stained coat, his ability to navigate chaos. Running a business, that explains nothing. Business, what scale allows one to so easily throw away expensive gifts to strangers? Her maternal instinct, always keen, whispers of potential danger. The world is full of strange people with unclear motives. What if this gratitude turns into something else? What if there's a debt behind it? A debt that one day will have to repay. She's used to relying only on herself. It's scary to let strangers, especially strangers like Min, into their small, well-ordered world. She decides she must refuse, return the gifts, or at least make it clear that she doesn't need anything else. Her hand reaches for the phone, searching for the scrap of paper where he'd written his number. But then she peers into Ayla's room. The girl is sitting on the floor, surrounded by sheets of paper, bright, pure colors fall on the expensive paper. She's not just painting houses and the sun. She's painting that evening, the dark street, a bright explosion in the distance, and a tall figure in dark clothes, standing with her back to the fire, and in front of her is a small pink dot. It's her, and him, protecting her. Ayla's face is filled with a focused, utterly happy calm. This isn't just a gift. It's the key to something important to her, to expressing the fear she's experienced, to transforming horror into art. Sharon pauses in the doorway. How can she take this away? How can she say, no, we can't accept this because I'm afraid? Her daughter, who had already faced real danger, now feels safe and creative. And part of that feeling is the paints from Uncle Ming. Sharon takes her hand away from the phone. The decision is postponed, not forever, just until tomorrow. She needs to think some more. Now she sees only her daughter's shining eyes and realizes that her own fear may be depriving Ayla of something good. Tomorrow brings a new package. This time, the courier rings the doorbell directly. Sharon opens it with a sense of foreboding. The courier silently hands her a neat, medium-sized cardboard box. He nods politely and leaves. She carries it inside, her heart pounding. Ayla is already there. In the box, wrapped in soft fabric, lies a blanket. Not an ordinary store-bought one. It's handcrafted, made of the softest, weightless wool, the color of dark plum. It exudes a subtle scent of cleanliness and wood. Beneath it is a small wooden box. Inside, in individual silk bags, are several varieties of tea, not tea bags, but whole leaves, twisted and fragrant, black, oolong, something with a subtle floral scent, and again, a card, to keep warm on cold evenings. Min, this gift hits the mark. It's not for Ayla anymore. It's for her, for Sharon. Cold evenings in their old apartment are a reality. The radiators are noisy, but the heat is weak. She often sits with a cup of cheap tea, wrapped in an old, threadbare blanket, while Ayla does her homework. This is too much, too sweet, too personal, too insistent, despite all the delicacy of execution. This isn't just gratitude for saving her. This is attention to the details of their lives, to their daily routine. This is a desire to integrate into their everyday life. The gift of fruit could be written off as formal politeness. The colors, attention to the child. But a warm blanket and good tea for her is a step across an invisible boundary. Sharon sits down on the sofa, clutching the incredibly soft fabric of the blanket. Fear and gratitude clash fiercely within her. On the one hand, It's a tenderness no one has shown her in years, a gesture that conveys concern. I know you might be cold and struggling. Let me give you a little warmth. On the other, a question. On what grounds? Why are you, a stranger, giving me warmth? Ayla presses the blanket to her cheek. It's so soft, Mom. And it smells good. And the tea, just like in a fairy tale. Sharon can't help but smile at her delight, but her insides clench. The decision comes of its own accord, firm and inescapable. This can't go on. She can't accept this quiet siege with kindness. It's both cruel and dangerous for him. She finds that very scrap of paper, a torn bill with a number written on the back. The numbers are neat and clear. She dials the number, feeling her palms grow clammy. At first, she's afraid the number doesn't work, or that some secretary will answer. The phone is picked up almost immediately, after the second ring. Hello? His voice, the same one, low, calm, emotionless. He didn't introduce himself. He was just waiting. Sharon is speechless for a second, rehearsing her prepared line in her head. Min, it's Sharon. She hears her voice sound a little higher than usual. Nervous. There's a brief but noticeable pause on the other end of the line. When he speaks, a subtle softness creeps into his tone that wasn't there in the first hello. Sharon, hello. Is everything okay? Is Ayla okay? His first thought is safety. It touches her, but she doesn't let it distract her. Yes, everything's fine. Thank you. She's simply delighted with colors. She paints all day long. It makes me happy, he says simply. I'm calling about gifts, Sharon begins, gathering her courage. They're beautiful, very beautiful. Fruit, paints, and a blanket with tea. That's incredibly kind of you. She pauses, hoping he'll get the hint, but he simply remains silent, letting her finish. But Min, this is too generous, too much. We can't accept this. We haven't done anything to deserve such generosity. You've already done everything. Saved Ayla. That's more than enough. The words come out in a hurried, halting patter. She's afraid she sounds ungrateful. There's silence again on the other side. Not heavy, but thoughtful. I understand, he finally says. His voice is still even. I didn't mean to embarrass you or create a sense of obligation. For me, this isn't generosity. It's correcting an imbalance. What imbalance? Sharon asks, confused. You and Ayla gave me a quiet evening in the midst of chaos, and something more. These gifts are just a feeble reflection of my gratitude. They come with no strings attached. Honestly, he says honestly, and to her surprise, she believes him, but she still feels uneasy. Believe me, I appreciate it, but please, no more. It's unusual. Okay, he agrees immediately without arguing. I heard you. There's no resentment in his submission. There's respect for her boundaries, and this suddenly makes her feel a little sorry. Sorry that she's cutting everything off at the root. There was something lonely in his silence on the other end of the line. But, he continues, and a cautious, almost hesitant note appears in his voice that she hasn't heard from him before. Since I've disturbed the peace, let me make amends differently, without gifts. I'd like to invite you to dinner, to a proper restaurant, with Ayla, so that I can formally apologize for the stress and thank you for dinner, like adults. He pauses. Only if it's convenient for you. No strings attached. His words hang in the silence that stretches along the wires between them. To invite you to dinner, a regular restaurant. It sounds as so simple, so normal, as if they've known each other for a long time, as if there hadn't been an explosion, a panic, and those generous, alarming gifts. Sharon is silent. Her fingers fiddle with the end of the phone cord. Her mind immediately produces a list of objections. She barely knows him. It's weird. Ayla, a man from another world. Dangerous. Unpredictable. But these objections collide with something else. With the memory of his reserve at her table, of how he listened to Ayla, of his voice, which had just said honestly and sounded honest. Min, she searches for words. I don't know, it's very kind of you, but no pressure, he interrupts softly but firmly. Think about it. This isn't an escape from an explosion, and it's not a necessity. Just dinner, in a public, bright place, with your daughter, to thank you properly and end this story on a calm note. He says, close the story. The words resonate with her. Yes, she wants to close this troubling, chaotic chapter, return everything to normal. And perhaps this dinner is the way to do it. To transform this strange savior into a mere acquaintance, thank him civilly, and part ways. Let me think about it, she finally says, and it's no longer a refusal. Of course, his voice sounds almost warm. I'll call in a few days to hear your decision. Good evening, Sharon. Thank you, and you too. She hangs up and leans her forehead against the cool wall in the hallway. Close the story. It sounds so logical. Why then does she have this feeling that something is only just beginning? A week passes, no more gifts appear. It's as if he actually heard her and removed the hand that held the gifts. The silence after his call seems like relief at first, then it becomes just silence, life as usual. Sharon goes to work, picks up Ayla from school, makes dinner, but something has changed. Ayla, having finished another drawing, this time it was a fantasy bird with feathers the color of the fruit in the basket, sometimes asks, "Mom, when is Uncle Min coming again?" "He didn't come, baby, he just helped us. But he's kind, and the colors are good." "Yes, he is kind, Sharon agrees. She finds herself thinking about him, not with alarm, but with growing curiosity. She remembers not the explosion, but his face in the light of the kitchen lamp. Stern, but not angry, tired. She remembers him saying, "The pasta was good," and there was no politeness in his voice, but almost surprise, as if a delicious home-cooked meal were a rare occurrence for him. One cold evening, she pours herself some tea from that very same box. The aroma is soft, enveloping. She wraps herself in a plum-colored blanket. It's incredibly warm and soft, and at that moment, his "to warm up on cold evenings" ceases to be an obsessive gesture. It becomes simply a thought, the very thing she so desperately needs. His quiet confidence, his strange, unobtrusive care, touched her. He didn't interfere with her life, didn't demand attention. He was simply there when he was needed, and then he stepped back, leaving behind the warmth of a beautiful blanket and the feeling that someone had thought about her and her daughter. Really. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Min-ho is wrapping up his affairs. The operation was swift, precise, and ruthless. The traitor has been found. It turned out to be one of the old lieutenants, whose ambition outweighed loyalty. The matter is settled. A lesson has been taught to everyone else. The threat has been eliminated. Order has been restored to his empire, ironclad and unconditional. He sits in his new, austere office. The reports are filed away. The enemies have been pacified. The debts have been repaid. Everything is as usual, but something is wrong. Or rather, not as it was before. Before, after such closing cases, he felt only cold satisfaction and an emptiness that he filled with planning his next steps. Now this emptiness doesn't frighten him. It's simply there. And all other thoughts fill it. They come unexpectedly, not when he's analyzing risks or giving orders, but when he looks out at the city from his high-rise window. He sees the lights in the apartment buildings. A single light in this window resembles the one burning in Sharon and Isla's kitchen. His thoughts, no longer constrained by the necessity of war and survival, returned more and more often and persistently to the dark threshold of that very same building, to the warm light that burst from behind the door, to the smell of simple food, to the sound of children's laughter he heard as he left. He thinks of Sharon, not as a woman witness, but as a person, of her tense, tired face, softening when she saw her daughter was okay, of her attempt to be strong and welcoming when the world around her was crumbling. He thinks of Isla and her questions about school and the hamster. This episode, this random point of calm in the eye of the storm, proved more vivid and meaningful than the entire victory he had just won. There, in the war, he had defended his territory. And there, on the threshold, he seemed to have found something he had never had. Something for which, perhaps, it was worth setting aside cold calculations. At least for one evening, he looks at his phone. In a couple of days, he's supposed to call her, as promised. Previously, this call would have been just another tactical move, the conclusion of an operation. Now he's waiting for it, and he hopes the answer will be a quiet yes, not a refusal. The call comes exactly a week later, as promised, on a Friday evening. Sharon, seeing the unknown number on the screen, already knows who it is. She takes a deep breath and answers. "Hello? Sharon, good evening. This is Min." His voice is calm as always. "Am I disturbing your peace?" "No, it's fine." She presses the phone to her ear, moving away from Ayla, who is watching cartoons. "I'm calling to find out your decision about dinner. I completely understand if you decline." Sharon looks out the window. Outside is a typical residential area, dull and safe. And this man is offering to step beyond this everyday reality, but there's no pressure in his tone, only quiet anticipation. "We thought about it," she says, and it's true. She's been thinking about it for the past 7 days. "We agree. Ayla wants it too." On the other end of the line, there's a barely perceptible sigh that could be mistaken for relief. "Excellent. I'm very happy. I've picked a place, a small Italian restaurant in the center. Very quiet, family-run. They have good pasta and a quiet atmosphere. Does that suit you?" "Yes, that sounds good." "Excellent. Then Saturday at 7? I'll make reservations. And thank you, Sharon." The last phrase, spoken a little more quietly, makes her heart clench for a moment. "See you Saturday, Min." The restaurant really is cozy. Small tables, dim lighting, the scent of garlic, basil, and fresh bread. Min-ho is already waiting for them at the counter. He's wearing a dark but simple sweater and trousers, without his imposing coat. He looks more ordinary, almost like he belongs there. Ayla, seeing him, first hides behind her mother's back, but then, when he nods to her and says a quiet, "Hello, artist," she crawls out and smiles timidly. There's a slight awkwardness at the table for a while, but Minho doesn't try to fill it with idle chatter. He hands the menu to Ayla and explains the simple dishes. Then he turns to Sharon. "They say they have excellent pasta carbonara here. Or would you prefer seafood?" His manners are impeccable. He pulls out his chair, catches the waiter's eye with a flick of his wrist. He's in his element, but he uses it to make them comfortable. Ayla, having tasted her lemonade and received a serving of spaghetti, gradually defrosts and begins to talk. She talks about her new drawing, about how Bublik the hamster escaped and the whole class was looking for him, about her friend who gave her stickers. A stream of consciousness, lively and artless. Minho doesn't interrupt. He listens. He nods. He asks clarifying questions. What color was his house? And was it found under his desk? He doesn't coddle her. He speaks to her like an adult, and she likes it. Sharon, watching them, gradually relaxes. She sees his stern face occasionally light up with a faint, barely perceptible smile at the corners of his lips. He says little about himself. He notes that the pasta here is indeed good, but that Sharon's sauce was better that evening. He explains that he loves strolling around the city early in the morning when the streets are deserted. He mentions having been to Italy, describing not the sights, but the smell of coffee in a small shack on the coast. He's a good listener. It's a rare quality. And Sharon finds herself talking more than usual about her job at the library, the difficulty of finding good children's books, her love of old black and white films. He listens to her as attentively as he does to Ayla. When dinner comes to an end and the waiter brings dessert, tiramisu for the adults, and ice cream for Ayla, the tension finally dissipates. A light, pleasant weariness from good food and relaxed conversation remains. "Thank you, Min. It was wonderful," Sharon says. And it's not just politeness. "Thank you for coming," he replies, his eyes reflecting the warm light of the candle on the table. Ayla, licking her spoon, suddenly asks, "Will we ever sit like this again?" Sharon looks away, embarrassed, but Minho answers first, calmly and simply, "If you and Mom allow it, I'd be happy. Maybe we could go to the movies? I heard there's a good cartoon about dragons on right now." Ayla freezes, her eyes wide, then turns to her mother. "May I, please?" Sharon, looking at her beaming face and Min's calm, open one, realizes the point of no return has been reached. Refusing now would mean scaring everyone again, pushing them away. And she doesn't want that. Well, I guess we can. Next weekend. This dinner isn't the end of the story, but the first link, the first thread connecting three lonely lives. Next week, they go to the movies. Minho buys the biggest popcorn, and Ayla sits between them, whispering comments on the screen. Then, as they leave the theater, they discuss the plot, and Minho, surprisingly for someone of his stature, explains the motives of the animated dragon. A week later, on a sunny Sunday, they go to the zoo. At Ayla's request, Minho patiently follows them, reads the animal signs aloud, and buys them ice cream. Sharon sees him looking not at the animals, but at her and Ayla, as if that's the real miracle for him. They're not family yet, they're not even close friends, but they are us, three people who met by chance in a fire, and are now step by step learning to find warmth in simple things. A shared dinner, a laugh at the cinema, a walk in the autumn sun. This is the beginning of something new. And all three, each in their own way, fear and hope for it. One Sunday afternoon, there's a knock at the door. Sharon, thinking it's a neighbor, opens it. Minho stands there, holding a neat candy store box. "I was nearby," he says, a little awkwardly, as if making excuses. "I bought an apple pie. Thought it might be for tea." Ayla is already rushing into the hallway with a joyful cry. From then on, this becomes a habit. First, he comes with a reason. A pie, new paints for Ayla, expensive coffee for Sharon. Then the reasons disappear. He just comes. On Sunday, after lunch, he ceases to be a guest. He becomes part of the Sunday ritual. He silently helps Sharon carry her heavy bags from the market. One day, overhearing her arguing about a leaky faucet in the kitchen, he takes off his jacket, rolls up his sleeves, and changes the gasket in half an hour while she hands over tools, and Ayla watches in admiration. His large, usually stern hands deftly handle a wrench. Another time, Sharon bought a disassembled bookshelf. The cardboard box and the assortment of incomprehensible parts left her disheartened. Minho, seeing this, silently took the instructions. An hour later, the shelf stood straight and sturdy, and he, wiping dust from his hands, merely nodded at her gratitude. He doesn't talk much, he does. And in these actions, fixing, assembling, simple help, Sharon sees not a gesture of ostentatious gallantry, but something more substantial. A desire to be useful, to be part of this small domestic world where everyone cares for each other. His job remains a mystery. Sometimes, especially on weekday evenings, he'll be away on business, and his expression will become focused and distant, just like that first night. Sometimes he'll glance at his phone screen, his eyes narrowing for a split second before he sets the device aside and returns to them. He says he works in business management. Sharon once gently asked him what kind of business it was. He looked past her and replied, "Various things. Importing, logistics." It was so vague, it was a clear signal. Don't ask, and Sharon stopped asking, not because she was afraid, but because she respected his boundaries. She learned to read him by other signs, by the way the tension drained from his shoulders when he crossed the threshold of their apartment, by the way his gaze softened when he looked at Isla, poring over her homework, by the way he remembered that Sharon didn't like cilantro, and once silently removed it from his salad for dinner, so she wouldn't be offended by the smell. He never speaks of high-flown emotions, but his concern for Ayla is sincere and unobtrusive. He asks about school, not just for show, and then, a week later, he might ask, "So have you made up with that girl, Masha?" He bought her not just any encyclopedia, but one about dinosaurs, after she casually mentioned it a month ago. He's become the adult to whom she can show her F in math without fear of anger, but in hopes of help. And he does help. He patiently explains fractions, drawing diagrams on a piece of paper in his neat handwriting. Sharon sees this sincerity, and she begins to trust not his words about work, but his silent actions here, within these walls. She trusts the man who is slowly but surely becoming their Uncle Ming. Now, Sundays have become a ritual. After lunch, or after a walk, or after Minho has fixed something, they gather in the living room. Sharon brews tea from that very same teapot. Ayla spreads her textbooks and notebooks on the table. Minho settles into the corner of the sofa. The scene becomes familiar and surprisingly peaceful. Ayla, her brow furrowed, does her homework, occasionally muttering under her breath or asking for advice. Sharon picks up a book, often one she's brought from the library, and immerses herself in it, occasionally sipping tea. Minho takes a folder of papers or a tablet from his briefcase. He skims through documents, jots down notes, and occasionally talks quietly on the phone in the next room, from where snatches of Korean can be heard. The silence in the room isn't oppressive or awkward. It's cozy, rich. It's filled with the soft rustle of pages, the scratch of Ayla's pencil, the quiet tapping of her tablet keyboard. Occasionally, their gazes meet. Sharon looks up from her book and sees Minho looking at Ayla, and his expression isn't that of an overbearing boss, but something calm, almost paternal. Then he notices her gaze, nods slightly, and returns to his papers. At moments like these, Sharon feels a strange, profound calm, a sense that everything is in its place, that the three of them form a temporary, fragile, yet incredibly strong universe. Here, in the silence, amid the smell of tea and book dust, all boundaries are erased. He is not a mysterious businessman with a dangerous life. She is not a single mother, always on guard. They are simply people who have found a safe haven in each other, and this silent pact of mutual peace and acceptance becomes stronger than any vow. Ayla's birthday. She was 8 years old. Sharon decorated the apartment with paper garlands and set the table. 2 friends from class came over, giggled, and played board games. Minho said he'd stop by later to run some errands. He showed up after his girlfriends had already left. He wasn't holding a box with a bow, but a large, heavy bag from a specialty store. "Sorry I'm late, birthday girl," he said, a rare, slight note of guilt in his voice. He pulled a box out of the bag. It wasn't a dollhouse or another craft kit. It was a complex, detailed construction kit for assembling a model of an old sailing ship. The box was marked 14+. Ayla froze, stunned. "This is for me?" "You," Minho nodded. "I thought you might be interested in creating something from start to finish. It's complicated, but if you want, I'll help." She didn't want if. She wanted it now. The pie was finished in a hurry. The gifts from her mother and friends were put aside. They spread an old sheet on the living room floor and poured out hundreds of small parts, wooden slats, and instruction sheets that looked like treasure maps. They spent the entire evening on the floor. Ayla, hunched over, searched for the necessary parts with frantic concentration. Minho sat nearby, his long fingers, accustomed to completely different tools, carefully separating the fragile components from the sprues, explaining the principle of assembling the frame. He didn't do it for her. He guided her. "Look, the groove here should align with this ledge." Slowly. "Yes, like this." Sharon cleared the table, sat down in a chair with a cup of tea, and simply looked at them, at her daughter's red head, almost buried in the diagram, at his bowed, serious head, at their hands, which sometimes moved in sync. The silence was broken only by the whisper of their voices, the rustle of paper, and the soft click of components being inserted. She smiled, not broadly, but with a deep, calm smile, coming from the heart. There was nothing in this picture of the troubled world from which he had come. Here was only the ship they were building together, and it was beautiful. His own apartment, located in a prestigious, secure building, remained a model of minimalism and order. Glass, steel, expensive materials, impeccable cleanliness. There were no knickknacks. Personal belongings were kept to a minimum, but now, on the huge steel refrigerator door, right in the center, sat the only object that disrupted the harmony, Ayla's drawing, the one where he was standing with his back to the fire. It was attached with a simple strawberry magnet that Sharon had given him so he wouldn't lose it. He looked at this childish drawing every morning when he poured water, and every evening when he returned. In the farthest corner of his closet now hung those same simple dark pants and sweater he wore to them, clothes for his other life. They didn't smell of the office or expensive perfume. They smelled of homemade cookies, baby shampoo, and comfort. Ayla's house, he had his own unspoken place. His cup, simple, white, ceramic, larger than the others. It always waited for him on the shelf. His slippers, not new, but the ones he'd once worn when he'd taken his shoes to be shined. And Sharon had said, "Keep them. You might need them again." They stood by the threshold. On Sundays, no one sat in his place at the table. It was his place. He came and felt. They were waiting for him here, not for his deeds, not for his help, not for his gifts, but simply because. Because he was him, Min, Uncle Min. And this feeling was new and so acute that sometimes, in the quietest moments, it took his breath away. No one uttered any big words. There was no talk of the future, of feelings, of who they were to each other. Everyone understood without words. Where once there had been a chance, irritated encounter at a red light, now there was this, simply together. Ayla chose. Sunday dinners, which Minho now sometimes cooked, surprising them with his ability to perfectly grill steaks or cook Korean noodles. Evenings, when Ayla fell asleep on the couch, and he and Sharon silently watched that same old black and white film, discussing it later in whispers so as not to wake the girl. He didn't change his life. He divided it into two parts. There was the outer one, harsh, demanding, full of calculations and quiet danger. And there was this inner one, hidden from everyone, his fortress, his safe haven. Sharon stopped asking questions. She saw him transform as he stepped through their door. She saw an invisible weight lift from his shoulders. She saw him laugh now, quietly, deep, genuinely. When Ayla said something funny, Ayla simply accepted him as a given, as part of her world. Uncle Min, who would always help with homework, listen, protect, and build any construction set with her, no matter how complex. They weren't a family in the traditional sense, but they became more than just friends. They became a small, safe circle, a place where everyone could be themselves, without masks, without fear, without loneliness. And it all started when a little girl ran across the street against a red light one day, and a stern man stepped out to reprimand her. A coincidence, or maybe not, as if it was meant to be.